My name is Bri Lynch. I'm 27 years old, a professional stunt driver, the owner of Chasing Checkers Racing, and today I'm here to talk about the business of stunt driving. I feel like I was kind of born into the industry of stunts and stunt driving a little bit. I got my first dirt bike when I was 3 years old because my dad was a professional motocross racer before I was born. So when he had his firstborn, he was just like, I'm gonna teach you how to race motocross. And like, you know, that's all he knew how to do. So he was like, this is how I have fun. Hopefully you like it. By the time I got my driver's license, my first car was a manual transmission little sports car. It was a Pontiac Solstice. I still have it. My dad, you know, taught me how to do some donuts and that, and it was kind of kept going from there. And I learned how to drift eventually and started posting my videos on the internet. And, you know, it's kind of how I got into stunt driving. Starting off as a stunt driver, I feel like within the industry, a lot of people think that I like came out swinging and like started working a whole lot. That's actually not the truth. I moved to California from New Jersey to go to film school at New York Film Academy. And I was doing a little bit of drifting here and there with my dad, on and off the track, you know, just like kind of going as we had time. I ended up going to work with him on this movie called Creed. I wasn't initially supposed to work on the film, but I ended up getting a spot on it because I needed another dirt bike rider. The director realized like, oh, we have a girl that can ride a dirt bike. That's so cool. Let's like put her in the front so we can see her. And once I really started putting my videos and stuff of drifting on the internet, I think I started getting more and more phone calls, and once people put the pieces together of like, that's Jay Lynch's daughter, I think it kind of really exploded from there, but it took a couple years. I worked on this music video for Beyonce. It was called Formation. They had my shot in the beginning of the day, and then I showed up on set. I was like first shot up, I showed up on set, and I think I was 20 years old at the time, and they were like, that's our stunt driver? And the coordinator was like, yeah. And they moved my shot to the last shot of the day immediately because they were nervous. I didn't know why, but it turns out Beyonce was gonna be in the car with me. She was basically laid across the seat to have her head out the window for the shot that they wanted. So I like was doing donuts with Beyonce's feet basically like in my lap. I got to work on Black Panther 1 and 2, which was huge because I was a hero car for both of those. So I was like driving the main vehicle of the chase sequence in both of those. The first one took place in South Korea, which was nuts. That was my first time like going out of the country for work. And then the second one we actually filmed in Georgia, and it finally came out and the movie looks great. And then obviously Fast and Furious. I've worked on like a couple of the Fast and Furious movies, and that was like big check off the bucket list, you know, like huge dream come true. I was like, I've only been thinking about this since I was like, you know, 10 years old. I feel like when it comes to stunt driving, a lot of it is a feel. So you kind of have to feel what you're able to do before you just decide that you want to get into that career. Unfortunately, I feel like with motorsports, it's something that you kind of learn from a younger age, and some people have the rhythm of it and some people don't have the rhythm of it, unfortunately. But everything can be learned, obviously. Like there's some basic moves that you can learn how to do when you're trying to get into stunt driving, like a sliding 90, a 180, you know, people call them J-turns sometimes, reverse 180, that kind of thing. So there's like specific schools that you can even take to try to learn those specific moves. But unfortunately, when you get onto set, it's not always a perfect environment, so you have to be able to kind of work anywhere with any kind of car and you know, any kind of surface and anything around you. For some reason, we never get any information before we show up. So a lot of the times the coordinator will call us, ask like, hey, you know, I have this car chase, you know, are you available? And you're like, what kind of car is it? And they're like, I don't know yet. I'm like, okay. And then they're like, you know, are you capable of doing this and this and that? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, you know, or you send your driving reel and they don't even ask you any questions after that because they just know that you're either ready for the job or they think that you are. And then usually when you show up the day of, people are like, so what are you doing today? When you're like in hair and makeup and you're like, I have no idea, you know? And you just show up and then eventually they put you in the car and you get to set and see everything. As much planning as there needs to be done, unfortunately the performers, we don't really get any information prior, so you kind of have to be ready for anything. Even sometimes on set, like we still don't have time to do anything. Like if I bring tools on set, it's like a waste of time because we don't have time to change anything about the car. I just have to like get in it and do whatever I can as fast as I can. You know, you're watching a movie, you're not thinking about all the people that are actually on set, and then everybody gets up by the time the movie's over and they don't look at the credits, but the credits are always super long because there's so many people that it takes to make all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. And as stunt drivers, you know, we have a day rate and then we have a weekly rate, and that's you usually get one or the other, unless if you do this thing called a buyout contract where you get to talk about your deal prior and negotiate it and everything, but that doesn't happen until you've been working for like 30 years. Or you're really seriously putting your life at risk, like some of the jobs that I've done where I've like flipped a car over, you know, like a day rate is not gonna be enough for that, for me risking my life to do something like that. Depending on the the type of stunt that you're doing and the skill set that it takes and the amount of times you're gonna have to do it, usually you get this thing called a stunt adjustment, which is whatever falls on top of your daily rate or weekly rate. And that's kind of up to the coordinator and the production, depending on like what their budget is. And sometimes it's not a fair stunt adjustment, and like you just leave work and you sign the G and you see what your stunt adjustment was, and you're like, oh, cool, I like risked my life for, you know, $500. I think as far as the movie industry goes, it's not a super diverse, you know, community to begin with. And then in addition to that, when you niche it down to stunt driving, it gets less and less and less diverse, you know. And unfortunately, I think that's just because of the demographic of it sometimes, and you know, like the accessibility of it. Stunt driving is very, very, very expensive. You know, sometimes when I go to the track, I'm going through a set of tires, meaning the 2 rear tires, in like in a matter of less than an hour. If I'm really like driving hard and like just focusing on what I'm doing, and like that's literally in an hour. I have 8 hours at the track, so sometimes I could go through like 8 sets of tires, which if you're paying $100 a tire, that's like almost $1,000 day easily after tax. And then I still have to pay to drive, and you know, if my car breaks or anything like that. So it's very expensive to get into, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of people that do it, or not a lot of people that put in the amount of time that you could put in to be one of the like top tier, top notch drivers. Thankfully for me, my dad has been working in the industry for like 30 years, and I've seen him go through all kinds of stuff. For a long period of time, we were having a big problem in the industry. This is like right before I started working, I think. I might have still been in high school, where they were putting wigs on men to double women. And the women were freaking out about it because they were feeling like that wasn't equal opportunity. Well, true, I agree with that, but the problem was we didn't have any women to fill the spot. Another thing that we were having issues with was paint downs, which was another big problem that we had. So I feel like a big driving factor for me when I started training and started working was I was one of the very few women of color that was driving at the level that I was driving at back then. Thankfully now we have a little, you know, we have some more people, and it's starting to become more accessible, and especially because of the internet, like people are seeing it all the time and trying to do things on their own. But yeah, it kind of motivated me a lot, because I knew when I showed up to work that I had to fill certain shoes, obviously, because of my father. I knew that people were immediately comparing me to him. So if you're like a hot seat driver, usually you're like doing a lot of car chases, and you're like, you know, you're in the hero vehicle, which means like the main vehicle that's being focused on in the chase, and like the vehicle that's doing all the crazy stuff, like crashing or drifting around a corner or whatever. And sometimes when you are a hot seat driver, you get put in the position where you get to do this thing called a turnover, which is a humongous opportunity. I did a turnover alongside of somebody that had been working in the industry already for 25 years, and I was turning 25 the day that we did the turnover, and I was on my second one, and he had still never done one before. So it's a really big deal to like be able to do that and have somebody trust you to do that, because you only get one shot at doing it. Like, okay, I have like all this pressure on me because we can only do this one time, and hopefully I don't mess it up. Especially, it's not something you can like practice. You can't like practice like flipping a car over, you know what I mean? It takes like a whole crew of people and like weeks prior to like build the roll cage properly for the car. And it's not just a roll cage, like a roll cage you can like order on the internet. It's like we have very specific ways that we curate the roll cages to keep us safe during the crash. And then obviously you have your own like protective seat and helmets and harnesses and like all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's a lot. But thankfully, I think I'm a little bit more prepared for it, just because I've been watching my dad do that, you know, my whole life, and I've seen so many other people do that in the industry, and I've safetied for other people, and I know what's going on because I've studied it so much and talked to so many veterans about, you know, turnovers and cannons and stuff like that. Turnover essentially is exactly what I'm saying out loud. It's literally turning a car over. So like the car might end up on its roof, or it might end up on the driver's side door or the passenger side door. So that's literally what the car is. The intention of the stunt is to get the car to roll over in some way, shape, or form. The car is going to do this big crash that you would like, you know, stop and look at on the side of the highway kind of thing. And then a cannon that's like creme de la creme of stunt driving. In my personal opinion, I always say you can't get bigger than that unless if you set the car on fire and send it through a hoop that's also on fire over a tank of sharks. Basically, if you think of like having like something like a cylinder, like a telephone pole, right? And you put that in the back of the car or in the front of the car, depending on where the car needs to do the cannon. Let's just say that it's gonna be in the back center of the car, so right in between the two back wheels of the car. As a driver, you have a button in your hand, like a literal physical button that you would be holding. And you drive the car to do whatever the car is supposed to do in the chase. And when you press the button, there's like a pneumatic like explosion that sends the cylinder out of the bottom of the car so that the car flips up into the air and goes over and over and over and over again. You have like a bomb like strapped to the car basically, and like you're just like, okay, I'm gonna like press this button at this time when I get to this mark on the street, you know, and you're driving like however many miles an hour, 40, 50 miles an hour, and you have to do it at the specific time so you don't ruin anything else. So yeah, it's a lot, and cannons definitely are very, you know, they take a lot on you physically. It's like a very big physical toll, and you're really sore afterwards. I usually take Advil prior. Learn that trick from a veteran. What a lot of people don't realize is they think that people that are stunt drivers are like daredevils and we just like don't care, you know, about our life or our livelihood or anything, but they're very calculated. You know, we try to be as calculated as we can and try to make sure that we can get everything done as safely as possible so that we can move on to the next shot before lunch. You know, I have like one of the coolest jobs in the world, and I love that I get to travel to go to these different places. I actually do this thing where I get a mug in every like country that I go to work, and I have this like cool little shelf where I have all of my mugs from like all over the world and stuff. So I've gotten to work in Portugal, Croatia, Slovenia, London, Budapest, South Korea. I feel like I'm missing a couple, but those are like probably just within the past like 5 or 6 years that I've gotten to work in all those different places. So it's kind of crazy. My mug wall is getting like really full. I have a second shelf now for it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a third one. My name is Bri Lynch, and that's the business of stunt driving.